Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. That's better. You know what is common between you and me? We are both developers. The only difference, very subtle, is for you, development is all about coding on a computer. For us, development is trekking in the Himalayas. That's the subtle difference. Now, before I actually jump into this presentation, which is actually a picture story, you won't find any bullet points. There are no fancy details. There is nothing related to any technical jargon, a bit maybe. But before all that, I would like to show you a video of the area that we work in, which is the Indian Himalayas, and how tough the conditions can be.
In winter, the passes are blocked by snow, but for 4 or 5 weeks, the river freezes and it becomes a highway, the only way to get to the remote villages.
Yo tute tupa ma poyondo te angwa khurden dulya mi do lu poyona yo shicharu dun ya do gui chui cha ba lo chui cha ba te
Yeah, and this can also connect with this light. Okay, these are the bulb holders and the switches connected via wire. But if you see, the wire is very, very thick and it's totally frozen. It's rigid. It's brittle.
So cold, it's about minus 15 now, isn't
We
it?
need to, cool. We need to warm this for another half an hour so that it can be usable. The beauty of silica is that at lower temperatures it gives more current. In one day it gets 9 hours of sunlight in summers. In winters it gets 6 hours of sunlight and proper sunlight. Hello kids.
Now here's the heart of the computer system. Now it works completely offline. There's half a terabyte of memory in here, and installed on here is all of Wikipedia, TED Talks, all sorts of other encyclopedias, all sorts of work.
It works very well and I gain many knowledge from it.
I think it's perfect for a student of mountain areas.
Unless and until the villagers have not basic facility, they will migrate to the town. Now the Hanamur, they got a basic facility, so probably their young generation will stay here.
So that is a short summary of what we at Global Himalayan Expedition do. Hi everyone, I am Jaideep Bansal, and we are a team of engineers working and very passionate about 3 main things. Number 1 is to really be able to touch and improve the lives of the remotest communities on this planet Earth, like the ones that you saw in the video. Number 2 is to preserve the culture that is in these remote villages. Some of these villages date back to the 10th century. That was the first village that we electrified, actually. So you can imagine the amount of culture and heritage that is stored in these villages. And the third passion is to leverage technology as a force for good for these communities. What is the first thing that you do when you enter a room that is dark? What do? You turn on the light. Well, there are 1 billion people in this world that don't know what a light bulb is. For them, they live in the most beautiful and remote locations of this earth. In fact, this is one of the villages that we had electrified a couple of years back. And when you look at the picture, the first reaction is, wow, that's amazing, I want to go there. They have clean air, fresh water, everything is organic. They lead the most sustainable lifestyle on this planet. But when night falls, this is how the families live. Now imagine if I put you in a small room and use kerosene lamps. Is that a situation you want to be in? I've been there, and trust me, it's not. Your eyes start watering, you start choking, but you cannot also go out because outside it is minus 20 degrees Celsius. The only option is to stay inside that room. And for adults, it is still manageable. Think about the kids and the elderly people who stay in these areas. And so, Global Himalayan Expedition is a for-profit social enterprise, and our main aim is to conduct impact expeditions to electrify these villages. Now, if some of you are thinking, expedition, electrification, how is this all adding up? Are we an energy company? Are we a travel company with the expedition name? Bear with me for some time, and I think it will all piece well together. So what we identified were two main problems in these remote areas. One is a lack of energy and lack of digital education in these remote areas. What happens when you don't have development in some of these communities? What it does is, it results in a migration of people. The youth in the villages don't want to stay there. Why would they want to when they can travel to the city and have access to basic facilities, access to road? Most of these villages, there's no road. You have to trek. They have access to hospitals. But if you do not bring development to these villages, the people will migrate, and with that, there's a culture that is lost from these areas. And so, for us, the solution was then to essentially leverage tourism, where we conduct expeditions. We call them impact expeditions, where we take travelers from all over the world to these remote areas in the Himalayas. And these travelers, as part of their expedition fee, also crowdfund for the solar grid that they set up in the village. So that's how the village gets electricity. And what it results in is for the villagers to be able to have access to clean energy. For them, the transition is from kerosene directly to solar, directly to renewable. They are not going through the life cycle that you and I have gone through of first burning coal and then moving towards renewable. For them, it's an instant transition. And then what it does is, it also results in preservation of this culture in these villages through a very innovative concept of homestays. Now imagine as a traveler, you could trek to these villages. The villagers will offer you food, give you warmth and hospitality, and you enjoy the culture, and while being able to access some of the basic facilities in the village. So it results in a cultural preservation in these villages. And for both access to energy and education, and for the homestays, we are using technology as the driving force. In fact, we do have a demo that we will run with you today over the next 15-20 minutes. Now, how does it feel to be part of our impact expeditions? For those of you who have never been to the Himalayas, here is a short glimpse of how it looks like. You end up traveling on dirt roads because the tar road is hardly for any patch of the road. So you go on these dirt roads for miles and miles, and finally the dirt road ends, so you trek. So sometimes you have to trek even 4 to 5 days to reach these remote villages. But when you finally reach the village, you are greeted by a culture and heritage that is centuries old. You see all the women there, some of them are holding jugs. That is their local beer. And then they have the white scarf, which is called the khatak, which they give you as a mark of respect to have traveled so far to their community. And then once you reach the village, after the welcome, you start working with the community, setting up the solar panels, setting up the bulb holders. And it's a very interesting process because every house that you go to, remember that even though these communities don't have access to basic needs, the one thing that they have, which I think some of us in the cities have lost, is the warmth and hospitality. They will welcome you as a family member. And every house you go to set up the bulb holder, you get tea. And without tea and biscuits, you are not allowed to leave the house. So we end up having 10 cups of tea in just 2 hours because of visiting so many houses. And sometimes when you are doing this, right, it's sort of touching to see the kind of reactions that you get from the villagers. This old lady, she was sitting there, 80-year-old lady, and she just saw that we were putting up the bulb holder. We'd not even switched on the light. And she started doing thank you. That's how much it means to them. And so this was the first village that we electrified. The name of the village is Sumda Chenmo. Now, if you start Googling it up, or if you try to find it on Google Maps, I'm sorry, you won't be able to. All the villages that we have electrified, I think less than 10% of them exist on Google Maps. The rest of them, we are trying to put them up now. But, so this was the first village that we electrified. Now, any guesses? Now, this was a village with 15 households, more than 200 people living here. How many days do you think it took us to electrify this village? Any guesses? 4? 2? Any more? 1 day. 1 day, 15 travelers got together with the community and brought light to this village. That is the power of using technology in the right manner. For a village that has never seen electricity, that always heard on the radio that one day they will get electricity. And suddenly, in 1 day, they had the shift. And so this is the work we have been able to achieve till date. We have been able to electrify more than 75 villages, impacted the lives of 30,000 people living in these remote areas, and offset more than 700 tons of carbon emissions from these villages. In fact, all our expeditions are carbon negative. So as a traveler, you travel from Berlin all the way to Delhi to the Himalayas. You go to the village, you electrify, and you come back to Berlin at your home, and you'll still be carbon negative. And in the process, we have taken more than 800 travelers from 60 different countries to empower these remote communities. And the beauty of it is, for most of them, it has been a life-changing experience where they have gone back and initiated impact projects in their own community, and which is what we really want. I think we are in the business of inspiring people to dream and to really leverage their skills to be able to create an impact in the community. You know, I was attending a talk just before this session, and the speaker pointed it out beautifully. He said that every line of code that you write has the potential to create an impact. And I'm building on that every line of code that you write has the potential to create an impact. It's up to you to decide what impact is that going to create. Now, I'll come to the technology aspect of it. The technology that we use to electrify these villages is the DC solar microgrids. It's a very simple solution, and one of the reasons that you have to keep it very simple is, do you all remember the old lady that I showed you who was holding her hands? If she's not able to understand this technology, then it's no use, because she's the user of this technology. So you have to understand who is at the end of the spectrum who is going to use this technology, and then design backwards to ensure that they are able to understand, they are able to maintain it, and if anything goes wrong, they should be able to troubleshoot it. And the whole technology, it's very simple. I can just quickly explain it to you. You have a solar panel. We have lead-acid batteries. You put a charge controller in between. You have an MCB, and then you just wire it up with LED lights. That's how simple it is. And for the villagers, they don't have to do anything. The panel lasts for more than 25 years. The batteries, every 1 year, you have to replace the water, which they can get in the local city. And that's it. That's the only maintenance they have to do. And why DC? Why direct current? Now, if you remember, I told you some of these villages are more than 3 to 4 days of trek distance away from the last motorable point. And that means that the nearest hospital is also 3 to 4 days of trek distance away. What you don't want is you set up electrification, and then somebody gets the electric shock, and the nearest hospital is 4 days. So that's why DC or direct current makes more sense because it is energy efficient, there is no risk of getting a shock, and it just calls for a lesser investment. It's just a very simple solution to bring light to these remote communities. Now, how do we identify? Now, I told you these villages are not on Google Maps. So how do we identify these villages? We have our local people who work with us, and you can see them surveying in the absolute snow, going and trekking to a village to survey some of these villages. You end up crossing, of course, these rickety bridges made out of small logs of sticks, and every step that you take, you are dangling along, which is a nice experience, by the way. And then once you reach these villages, it is not like, it does not work this way that you can carry your solar panels and batteries and say, hey guys, we are here, here's electricity. It won't work that way. The number one thing is the community has to buy into what you are giving them. If there is no community buy-in, we do not electrify the village. And luckily for us, we've had no such experience till date. So what a village mobilization really means is talking to these communities, sharing with them the technology, showing them how the LED lights work, and telling them about the model of electrification. Now, what is this model of electrification all about? This is a very nice picture. His name is Sonam. And when we were mobilizing, we had some LED bulbs that we had taken for a demo, and this is him looking at a LED bulb for the very first time. And he was just stuck like this for almost a minute, just looking at the LED bulb. And so it just captured it. But this is what mobilization is, to tell community what they're going to get. And what we ask the community to do is open a bank account for the community. And they put in close to $2 or roughly 1.5 to 2 euros every month into that bank account. Why do you think this is necessary? Sorry? Maintenance? Yes. Commitment? Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that. So one, it serves as a pool of funds for them to be able to maintain the system. It shows them ownership, and it shows a commitment for the community that they are ready for this. Now, the interesting thing is, the amount of money that they put in is calculated roughly that the batteries, the life of the battery is typically 5 years warranty. Now, if the batteries fail before 5 years, they can get it replaced for free. After 5 years, they have to, of course, pay money to replace those batteries. So the amount of money that is collected is to ensure that after 5 years, they should have enough money to replace the batteries in the village. But what happened in the first village that we electrified in 2014 is the villagers have been able to accumulate enough money to not only replace the batteries, it's been only 4 years, the batteries are still working fine, but now the excess money that the community is accumulating will be used by the villagers to put up streetlights. So what it does is it gives them total ownership of the system. It allows them to scale it up, and it allows them the freedom and the flexibility to get what they want as a community together. And so this is why we really emphasize. And the funny thing is, initially when we started electrifying villages, we had to, of course, survey a lot of them. And then you land into this city called Leh in Jammu and Kashmir in India. When you land, after like a year of electrification, we actually had villagers waiting outside the airport with a passbook, with a silk scarf, asking us, here is the passbook that you wanted, here is the khatak, now come and electrify our village. So it became like a pull model where we were getting pulled to these villages to electrify them. And so once we have the buy-in from the community, the next thing is, of course, transporting the grid material. How do you do that? There are no roads. So the only way to do that is on a horse or a donkey. And the interesting thing is, we were at this energy conference and talking about this solution, and one of the professors in the audience, they said, you should just take a big panel, big setup, big batteries, and electrify the village. We said, absolutely fine, we can do that, but we need to first ask the donkey, how many kgs can the donkey carry? So that governs the grid size. So that governs how big your batteries can be, how big your solar panels can be. Because if the donkey says, I cannot carry more than 15 kgs on this mountain slope, that's your grid size. So that's practical aspect of technology in these remote areas. And some places where the donkeys also cannot carry, the human beings have to carry. We've had villagers who've crossed mountain passes at 17,000 feet carrying batteries. And this just goes to show how much it means to them. It brings me to my point, how many of you in the audience are thinking, look, if these communities are so remote, they have their culture, they are preserved, why do you want to spoil them with technology and with television and all this? How many of you are feeling on those lines? Can I have a raise of hands? Good. I'll share with you two stories which I think might clear your perspective. So there was this group of travelers trekking on a route, and they met with the local leader. And they asked the local leader, what are your agendas? He said, I want to first get road to my people. They said, no, you should not bring road here. Where will we trek? But the reality is, in the villages that this trek was going to, because there was no road, the trek routes got blocked by snow. There were a couple of people who were sick in the village, and they had to be carried to the nearest hospital 3 days away on a frozen river by the youth of the village, piggybacking on each other. So who do you think you should listen to? Do you think we should listen to the travelers who are coming here for a trek, or for the local people who face a problem every day? My second point. We electrified a village, and when we electrify a village, we do the entire community lighting also with the street lights. Now, Ladakh, Himalayas at 13 to 15,000 feet is a beautiful place to watch the night sky. You get to see the Milky Way. So one of the ladies, she met us. She was from UK. She said, you guys did a good thing with the electrification, but I cannot see the night sky now. Whom should we listen to? To the villagers who had a difficulty just walking around the village because they used to slip, because it's all mountain slope, or to the traveler who wants to see the night sky? So ultimately, my point here is, when the development is being asked for by the people, when it is a pull, it is for those people to decide whether they want it or not. It is not for you and I to decide which person has access to development and which person does not have access to development. And one of the things that you also saw in the video initially, if the people do not get development, they will migrate. There won't be any culture left in these villages. But if you bring them development and if you provide them economic opportunity, which incentivizes them maintaining their culture, that is going to preserve their culture. And then once the entire grid material, coming back to the presentation, once the entire grid material is transported, maximum 1 to 2 days is what it takes us to bring light to this village. And I really love the picture on the left, where you can see a father showing the son the light bulb for the first time. And it really brings a lot and shows and means a lot to us when we see sites like this. And this is the visible impact that we've been able to create. The same room before and after electrification. And for me, frankly, if you ask, access to energy is about having basic dignity to be able to see the food you are eating at night in these villages. That's it. It's as simple as that. You can bring all the impact analysis parameters to access to energy, but it all comes down to being able to provide a basic dignity to these people. And the same amount of light that you and I enjoy back home. And so this is an example of a village complete with the street lighting, and this was the highest village that we electrified at almost 15,400 feet, where we ended up getting sunburnt and frostbitten at the same time. So the conditions can be really harsh. What does it mean for these people when they experience light for the first time? I wish I could take you there right now, but I'll just share some of the experiences. The people start dancing. When was the last time that happened with you, that you entered a room, you switched on the light, and you started dancing? The people start crying. And some of them, they just, I have a picture, actually, and I'll come to that. This is how much it means to them. You remember the khatak that they put around people? They put it around the charge controllers along with butter. And they pray the charge controller for its long life. That's religion and science, Buddhism and science coming together. And this is Sonam again. This is the same person who was just observing the LED light. He's a monk. practices religion. And when he saw the light, this is his reaction. He just started looking at the light bulb, started praying before it. That's how much it means for these communities. And yeah, I just love this picture. The little girl, she just kept looking at the light bulb and just started playing around with it. So you get a multitude of reactions from the people, and they range from very emotional to just pure joy and happiness. Now, once you have access to energy in these remote areas, you can then build on another foundation, which is education. That's the basic need of these people, of the students here. And so what we have done is we have set up this innovative thing called the Himalayan Innovation Centers. And what it essentially is, again, building on the DC microgrid architecture, we put in DC LED TVs, we have a Raspberry Pi we use as a CPU, and we have a contact access point by Intel, which is a Wi-Fi router with almost 1 terabyte of storage capacity, which creates a localized hotspot. And on that 1 terabyte server, we load all the content around Khan Academy, Wikipedia, TED Talks, and the local curriculum. And so this is the technology, very simple, a low-watt computing device, which is the Raspberry Pi, and the contact access point. And what it has resulted in is that the kids are now able to explore content that they were otherwise limited because of the knowledge that they had from the books that they had. And so the first thing that this girl started looking up was the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's just fascinating to see what the kids want to do. They want to learn about where they are from. And most of these kids have never touched a computer before. But in all our cases, we have seen, you don't even have to teach them. Just set up the infrastructure, get the kids in. They start figuring out that the mouse does something. And it's interesting how they work with the mouse the first time they see it. They think it will harm them. And then they start touching it, and they see it does something on the screen, and they start moving around with it. And with the keyboard, they start playing, and they realize, OK, this is what I can do. It takes them only 5 minutes to figure everything out. And the first thing they want to do is look up which area they are from. So they go to Wikipedia. They will search Ladakh, or Leh, or India, or Buddhism, and they want to learn where they are from. But what does this really do? I mean, when you give kids access to information, it just opens up their minds to a million possibilities. And what we have seen, I've already covered this, but what we have seen is that the kids, they started learning about upcycling material. And so one of the schools that we set this up in, the kids took PVC pipes, which were being used for the construction in the school, made flute out of it. They took tin cans, they made drum kits out of it, and they called themselves the Trash Band, and they went around the community teaching the community how you can upcycle material, all by self-learning. And there was this another school where the students, they took all the paper that they were throwing away, upcycled it, made it into new paper, and then painted on it and decorated their school. And this is all from self-learning. It just opens up their minds to so many possibilities. And of course, if you or anyone of you here can help us with more content for these kids, whether it is learning basic coding, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing to have one of these kids from these villages sit here at the conference next year with you? And if you have any resources, please do get in touch with us. And what we realized was, the computer facilities are there. Why not open it up for the community? And so after the school hours, the entire community gets into these computer centers, and especially the women, they are really passionate about learning, and they get into here and they learn about numerous things which they otherwise couldn't have. And this lady, when she saw some of these stuff, she just started crying. Just access to information, it becomes really emotional. And what we realized was, can we use this technology to really develop more for these communities? And so we started setting up these centers where the women can come, learn about weaving techniques in this innovation center, and worked with the government, local government there, to set up weaving machines. So the ladies of these villages came to the center, learned the weaving techniques, did the weaving, and then started selling their produce in the local market. And so this was the first project that we did with the local government to help the local handicrafts of the village to be able to earn income. Have everyone heard about Pashmina or Kashmir? It's a very fine wool that grows in the Himalayas, and this is what these centers are doing. They're producing the finest pashmina fabric, and they are selling it to the market directly, where the women are now earning money by learning the newest techniques. And when we talk about technology, what we realized was because we are working in such harsh conditions, it just makes sense to have our own technology end-to-end. Why? Because then we are able to train people on how to maintain it. So we have our own panels and batteries. And besides that, we also have our own televisions, the DC LED televisions, and the LED lights. And all these lights were initially being manufactured in Delhi on an assembly line, but now we are working to actually get these manufactured in the local area itself. So we are now training women in the region to be able to assemble these LED lights, package them locally, and then sell them locally. So it really empowers the community and creates an economy which is circular within the region. And now, once you have access to energy, once you have access to education, how do you ensure that there is economic empowerment of these communities? And for this portion of the presentation, I would like to call my colleague Gagan, who leads our initiative called Mountain Homestays. Think of it, you have a village that is electrified, but they need to earn money. How do you do that is what we'll learn now. Gagan.
Thank you, Jaideep. So Jaideep has set the context very well, what we are trying to do in these villages in Ladakh, in the Indian Himalayas. And during the last 4 years, we have had some very humbling experiences in these remote communities. And we have observed real need of development in these communities after the solar infrastructure is developed. These economies, the rural economies, are kind of in a very depressed state. There is a lot of poverty. So the homestays concept is again using tourism as a tool for development. So if we can bring tourists to the villages, the families can get direct income. So that's the idea that, so in the process, even the travelers, they also get the benefit of actually getting a community experience when they travel to those villages. And this is what the travelers today are looking for. And on the other side, the villagers are able to earn some income. And we are people who are like, we are a team of engineers who are really passionate about using technology and ideas which can benefit these communities. So we are adding new features to these homestays, some of which I will be demonstrating in the next few minutes. So we have put few telescopes in these villages. I will tell you why. So first of all, this is how a homestay looks like. Imagine you just trekked for about 2-3 days to reach a remote village in the Himalayas, and you get this comfortable traditional way of living, apart from all the local food that you can try there. And so it also helps the villagers. Otherwise, the villagers would have just left their culture, their ancient monasteries and the heritages and gone to the nearest city to earn that income, but now they are getting that income in their households. And this is the reason why we have put telescopes there. You are at almost like 12,000, 13,000 feet. There's no pollution there. So you can really gaze the sky. The Milky Way is just visible with the naked eye. And with telescopes, you can actually see deep space objects. And coming to technology, this is another thing that you see when you enter a village, that there is a Wi-Fi access point available in that village. So big surprise that you just reached a village and you didn't have any phone connectivity, any internet connectivity for the last few days, but suddenly you can see a Wi-Fi hotspot there. So we call it CTIS. So what the idea is, what actually kicked us to develop this system was that in the last 2 years, when we started promoting homestays in the 20-plus villages, so we had these travelers coming from all across the world to these villages. But when they enter the village, they are clueless about what they can do in the village, what are the activities, whether they can buy any handicraft. And they want to know, like, what are the things to see around. So this server serves as an information hub for the traveler to actually access all that information without actually, because there is a language barrier as well, because these are remote communities in the Himalayas. So you don't know the local language, but you can just connect to this server. In fact, I have a demo right now. So this computer is right now connected to this server. So you can just use your phone to open the website within the village, and you can get all the information in context to that village, that where you are, what is the community all about, and what are the activities that you can do. Like in this village is actually at 14,000 feet, and it has a village house, ancient village house. So this you may have otherwise missed if you were just a traveler who happened to be in the village, but you couldn't interact with anyone, you couldn't get this information. But now you can go and look up all the details, what are the other things. You can learn the local cuisine there, like you must have heard about the Tibetan momos. So apart from that, you would also be interested to know, like, what is the story of this village, of the sustainable development that is happening in the village. And of course, the most important thing, you might be interested to know the visitor reviews who have already traveled to this village. So it's a very simple technology. This is a server based on Raspberry Pi again, and it's a low power system which can work very effectively over the solar infrastructure that we have put. And on this server, we are trying some interesting things as well. Like we have put a bunch of Android applications there. Now imagine you are in a remote village and you could otherwise have no internet to download any application, but within the village because there are other issues, there's no connectivity. So if you are few people staying in one house and few people staying in another house, but you want to communicate with each other. But there is Wi-Fi available, so you can use these applications. And we have also identified that once you set up a Wi-Fi network within the village, even the villagers are getting benefited. They can communicate with each other. The conditions are very tough, as Jaideep already walked through that. In the night, the temperature may go to -20, -30. You may not want to go out and shout or walk down to another house, but you can use the Wi-Fi too. So we are also thinking of more ideas, like putting applications on this server, which can help the villagers, the village women for maternity care, because the nearest hospital is at times 2 days treks away and other things. So that is the idea of CTIS, that it's kind of an enabler technology for the villagers, which are otherwise disconnected from the world, but at least they can have access to the useful applications, and the travelers who can get details about where they are traveling. And so this is what it all boils down to. Like, we are trying to make simple solutions for the community problems. So yeah.
Thank you, Gagan. So what essentially happens when the community starts earning? They are able to actually scale up the grid. So we had this village. You can see the lady carrying her solar panel on a frozen river behind. So the village got electrified in 2015 because of the homestay tourism. Every night they are able to, they host tourists, they are able to earn more than $20, which is a lot of money. And so with that $20, slowly they started scaling up, uplifted themselves out of poverty, and now they have a television in the village, with which now they are charging travelers more money because they get access to all these facilities. And what we have realized is that all this work, all the electrification, education, the homestays, if you empower the community in the right manner, it can be a huge driving force. It becomes a bulldozer for you to really break any wall that you may face. And we believe strongly in the power of women in these communities, because frankly, if you teach a man, you teach a man. But if you teach a woman, you teach the entire family. And with that principle, we've trained a lot of women in these villages to become engineers. So now we have these women engineers who go to these villages, and remember that in these villages, the women have never done engineering. They are housewives. And so when our women engineers, they go to these villages, it not only inspires the community that they can do more, but also these women engineers are getting respected by the elderly. So it is changing the way how these communities are thinking by just empowering a set of individuals. And that is what it really means for these communities. In terms of I'm now coming towards the end, we have strong partnerships across different verticals. We are working with, on the left-hand side, you can see the partners we are working with in energy access. We are working with IEEE, with the World Economic Forum, and the ICMOD, which is sort of a World Bank for the Hindu Kush mountain region. Then we have our corporate partners, essentially companies that work with us, where what we tell them is, if you want to build leadership, don't do it in a corporate boardroom. send your leaders out there to the mountains, get them to electrify the villages. They learn A, B, C, D of the leadership, period. And so we have these companies that send their leaders and employees on corporate leadership expeditions to electrify villages. And then we have partners within the tourism sphere, like Booking.com and the World Travel and Tourism Council. And so overall, like I mentioned, that's the numbers for you in terms of energy access. And we have set up 17 education centers, 7,500 students impacted, and we have created more than 60 women entrepreneurs, engineers, homestays, and whatnot. Along the way, we have received a lot of traction. Luckily, we've had National Geographic that made a documentary on the work as part of the Breakthrough series. The episode is titled Power to the People. You can look it up online. And then we also have the BBC documentary, which I played in the beginning. And then in terms of energy access, we have been recognized by the IEEE, by the SE for All UN initiative, and also GHE was at the Expo 27 Astana Future of Energy Expo last year, where they made a full-scale model about the work we are doing in technology. And within tourism, we've been recognized by some of the world's leading travel and tourism organization bodies. So I hope now it pieces the puzzle together, whether we are an energy company, whether we are a travel company, but essentially, we might be anything, but what we are doing is leveraging anything it takes to really empower these communities. So there's no silo that you can put us in, and I think that's how we define ourselves. And how can you get involved? Definitely, you can come with us on a trek or an expedition to the Himalayas, but we have 3 problem statements that we would like to share very quickly with you. One is inter-village wireless communication that we plan to develop, then microgrid energy sharing, and the third problem is deep space image processing. And I'll just come one by one to it. So what we are essentially looking at for the first problem statement is create a mesh network based on the ISM band to allow villages to communicate with each other. So there's an inter-village connectivity and the intra-village connectivity. The whole idea is that the villages should be able to communicate because there is no mobile network, there's no cellular network here. So how do you enable communication in these remote areas? So that's one problem statement that we are looking help at. The second one is energy sharing. So like I said, every house is able to produce and consume their own power. But imagine if they could share power and get paid for each other. So if I have a wedding in my house, I could just buy energy off you, and then you get money in return. So it's a good way for you to earn money by just selling the excess energy, because the solar panel, there's 300 days of clear sky, highest solar radiation. So there's a lot of energy that you can store and just sell. So that's the second problem statement. And the third one is deep space image processing. So like we said, we are setting up telescopes in these remote villages, where as a traveler, you can go look at the deep space image. But what if, during the morning, the house lady, she comes to you with a framed image of a deep space image that was captured last night? What it results in is money for the villagers, and you get an experience of a lifetime. So we are looking at leveraging Raspberry Pi to develop these. So if there's anyone in the crowd who can help us with this, that would be great. So that's a core team. We are a team of 3 people, but we have a lot of people locally that work in Ladakh, and we have some volunteer team leaders, essentially people who have been on our expeditions but come back every year because they just like the experience so much. And we have an advisory board with experts from the tourism and the energy industry. And yes, you can see there's a spot vacant, so if anyone is willing to apply, please let us know. Yeah, so that's what we do. That's GHE for you. And in the end, I would like to say, let there be light. Thank you, everyone.